Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. Time for this week's edition of Longhorn Weekly, and it's brought to you by Allegiant Digital Marketing. We'll tell you more about Allegiant Digital here later in the show. CJ, let's start off. The athletic year is officially over, and Texas has won another Director's Cup, fourth in 5 years. And instead of breaking down kind of how Texas got here, we know how they got here. What's your quick take? Give me one sport you think overachieved to help Texas get this Director's Cup, and which one do we maybe need to see more of in the coming athletic year?
Well, I think the first one that we need to see more of is basketball, right? You know, that's kind of been the weak link over the last few years. I know that's been a heavy discussion topic over on Texas Football Land on social media, but I feel like there's reason for hope, right? With Sean Miller, we've seen what he can do at Xavier. We know that he's able to build programs. Time at Arizona. What's more encouraging is in the conference that you're in currently, the SEC, got to be able to score points. You got to be able to do so consistently throughout the season. That's been the issue for Texas over the last few years. But you look at Sean Miller's teams, and it looks like they should be competitive all the way throughout. So that's one reason for optimism with basketball. And again, if you get into the second weekend consistently at Texas, you're doing a fine job there. So I do think Texas basketball will be better next year. I think it'll be better moving forward. But right now, it's clearly the weak link on campus. Overachieve. Look, you win a national championship. You did a fine job. Texas softball, hat tip to them. I don't know if it's an overachievement since they came in as the number one team in the country to the preseason. But just being able to withstand the run of a Texas Tech, of an Oklahoma, going in and defeating a UCLA, a Tennessee, a Florida, everybody that was in those College World Series. Impressive stuff. So credit to them. And again, I think that Texas volleyball also in the midst of a nice bounce back coming up next fall as well.
CJ, let's talk about football from that standpoint as we transition to talk about matters on the gridiron. As we look back now and look, we're closer to the start of a new season than we are to the end of the old one. Did football underachieve, overachieve, or pretty much meet expectations for you for year one in the SEC?
Look, I think they met expectations. You were a Final Four team a year ago. You returned a lot last year. It's kind of the opposite of what we expect this year, of course, going into the 2025 season. But you ran into a really hot Ohio State team. And I think by the end of the season, folks realized Texas was pretty limited with what they had on the offensive side of the ball, right? You didn't have that bell cow number one true game-changing running back. Quinn Ewers was dinged up basically the entire season. And by the end of it, and it hasn't been talked about a lot, but you didn't have that cohesiveness on the outside at wide receiver that maybe you thought coming in. Of course, with the Isaiah Bond injury, you didn't see a whole lot of him. And then it was basically just force feed Matthew Golden because, right, Ryan Wingo had LASIK right after the season. He was basically playing blind. It was an interesting topic that, again, I feel like got swept under the rug quite a bit. Point being, it was a national championship winning defense that Texas was able to put out on the field last year. The offense, and I think we felt it sputtering towards the back half of the season. It just didn't live up to the expectations, but another top four finish. I know that Texas fans are eventually going to get tired of that, but 2 in a row, you're certainly in the right position moving forward with the number one class coming in and Arch Manning taking over the helm.
I would say surpass my expectations just because of the further removed we get from the end of the football season as we start looking into 2025, how good that defense was last year. They were a great sudden change defense. They were a great situational defense. They were able to overcome bad field position time and time again. They were good enough, more than adequate to help Texas win a national championship. And if you think about it, CJ, if you just get a little bit of help from your special teams, if the offense doesn't turn it over as much, your defense could be just as effective as it was last year. Are they going to be as dominant? Are we going to see as many goal line stands and takeaways and things like that? I don't know, but hopefully you won't need them to be that level of elite to get back to where you were. And I'm glad you brought up Ryan Wingo because that's where I wanted to go next, because we're at the point in the summer where a lot of guys are now with name, image, and likeness. This is one of the benefits. Guys can go back home, host football camps, and Ryan Wingo hosted one in St. Louis over the weekend. Quite a few Longhorns went up there with him, Arch Manning chief among them. And, CJ, as we saw some clips from this get out and the kind of the feedback we've gotten from Ryan Wingo's camp. That and some of the guys are starting to show their personalities on TikTok a little bit. You're getting a little behind the scenes now of what this team is like. When Sark has talked about culture and how close this team is and how focused they are, how driven they are, you start to see some of these guys off the field, CJ. It's not just lip service. You get the feeling that the culture stuff Sark talks about, that's not just him talking about it, trying to prop up the program. That's really where Texas football is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, I was at the Jordan Washington, Michael Taft camp down in Austin, Westlake. You look at what Leon Galafal does, bringing a number of his teammates and close friends from the team out to Hawaii for a camp up there. It speaks to wanting to give back, wanting to be a part of the community, wanting to be a change of where you grew up and want to see the next generation, the middle schoolers and incoming high schoolers really start to take their strides as people as well. It's a cool deal. So, for Ryan Wingo to bring out DeAndre Moore, Aaron Butler, Arch Manning, that's big for the city of St. Louis, I'm sure. And it's cool to see. It's cool to see Texas Longhorns use their NIL the right way and give back in ways that, not a lot of other folks are able to do. So this is a cool moment for Ryan Wingo. It speaks to his character. It speaks to the character of what's going on behind the scenes as well in the locker room. And it's a lot of lip service for us talking about the culture, Jeff. But when you see stuff like this in between weekends in which you're probably out on the field sweating in 100-degree heat, and you got to come back out and do it again on Monday, this is a cool getaway if their vacation is given back to kids in their communities.
Speaking of camps, Peter Pudgy, lifetime Longhorn, has one coming up this weekend benefiting his nonprofit organization. There are some former Longhorns, Roshan Johnson scheduled to be there, Christian Jones among them, but Ryan Wingo's expected to be there. Trey Owens is expected to be there, and Neto Mazzullo is expected to be there. So it's good to see the Longhorns in the NFL still very much supporting causes that are going on in the city of Austin, and kind of seeing that those two groups bridge together, the guys that played a couple of years ago with some of the guys on campus. And parents, if you're looking for somewhere to drop the kids off on Saturday, a skills camp with Peter Pudgy and a host of Longhorns, both former and current, isn't a bad place to go. CJ, as we start looking at off-season workouts again in Texas, full go. They're in the midst of the summer conditioning program right now with Torrey Beckton. This is where you win football games. They are won and lost based on what you do in June and July. Jonah Williams getting back to work. I know that's one thing that a lot of fans were concerned about. Hey, when is Jonah going to be ready? He played through the end of baseball season with a hamstring issue. They just needed to give him some time off to rest that. CJ, what can be our realistic expectations for Jonah Williams? Because we talked a minute ago about teams that lived up to expectations, exceeded them, fell short. Jonah Williams exceeded my wildest expectations for what he was going to do for the baseball program. But I think we all expected he's going to play some role for this football program. Can he get himself in a position as a true freshman where he can return punts? Can he be a factor on special teams? Can he get himself into what's a really deep, talented safety rotation as he starts working his way back and getting into football mode and football shape? What are your expectations for Jonah Williams in 2025, CJ?
Certainly some sort of role on the special teams, whether it be the return man for punt team, whether it be a guy that they utilize on kickoff, return, whatever it is. Get the ball in his hands in one of these special forces and let his athleticism take over. I'm all for that. Now, I think we look back at what Derek Williams was able to do his freshman year, kind of infiltrating the lineup, earning the trust, and as the season went on, that role just increased and increased. I don't know if that's fair for Jonah Williams this year. And I know that neither of them had a spring, but you look at the bodies in the room in which, hey, Derek Williams was able to walk in, look around and say, hey, by middle of the season, I deserve to be the guy, right? I don't think that's going to be the case for Jonah. And I think Jonah's a heck of a talent. I think by the end of it, and Rod Babers has talked about it a ton, he's going to be in a conversation for a Thorpe Award by the time his time in Austin has concluded. But this room is much deeper than it was 2 years ago. There's a lot more talent and bodies in this room this year than what we saw in 2023. So, yes, I do think if he's able to scratch that rotation, be a guy that you can rely on for 15, maybe 20 snaps a game in the middle of your secondary, that's a good win for Jonah Williams. Is he a guy that I'm expecting to see 45 snaps each game, Jeff? Probably not. But I do think special teams ace, return man perhaps, and a rotational piece for that secondary is going to be a successful year one for Jonah.
We'll get back to off-season workouts and wrap up this edition of Longhorn Weekly here in just a minute. But right now, I got to thank our sponsor for this week's edition. That is Allegiant Digital Marketing. Are you a business owner who struggles with any of the following? Finding new customers, consistent leads, finding marketing services to promote your business that actually work? Founder and CEO Chad Markham with Allegiant Digital Marketing, it's an Austin-based advertising agency, has helped thousands of business owners just like you for over 25 years conquer these same challenges. So if you're ready to start making money in your business and grow with confidence, visit allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball and get a free marketing plan. Plus, you can save up to $2,500 in advertising with their Hook 'em Horn special today. Again, that's allegiantdigital.com/ontexasfootball for your free marketing plan. And we thank Chad Markham and Allegiant Digital Marketing for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. CJ, on summer workouts, one position group that I'm curious, anxious, however you want to couch it, to see what progress they make, the more I think about it, is the tight end position. You know, Rod Babers and I have talked a lot about this on Football Theory in terms of 12 personnel is not going away, that football's trending more into that direction. And you look at the pieces that Sark has there, and I don't know that right now they've got like a legitimate 5-tool tight end. But with Jack Indries, who's got skins on the wall, he's produced at the power conference level. Jordan Washington coming off. It seems like every young Texas tight end under Jeff Banks, whether it's been Gunnar Helm or Jatavian Sanders, they have that 1 year where you kind of learn the position and grow into it. And then the following year where now you're getting high leverage snaps. That seems to be the next step for Jordan Washington. And then Nick Townsend getting to campus. We talk about Emery Winston. You start looking at the depth and talent at the tight end position, CJ. You can say this about several positions on offense, but I don't know that any position has the type of ceiling that tight end does, given how much some of these guys can grow from now through the course of the end of the regular season and hopefully getting ready for another college football playoff run.
Yeah, especially with the addition of a Nick Townsend. And I know it's tough for young tight ends. You kind of laid it out there, Jeff. You kind of have a buffer at tight end, right? You got to get physically ready to go hit a guy like Ethan Burke or to help on a Alfred Collins level guy in the SEC. That's not easy for a kid 6 months removed from being in high school, right? So for these younger tight ends, getting the body acclimated is going to be key. We saw that last year with Jordan Washington, where we really didn't see him on the field all too much. Now we're expecting him to be a big focal point of the offensive line, extended out at tight end, right? That's kind of what they're utilized at, especially in 12 personnel. But if Jordan Washington's coming in around 255-ish, that's enough meat on the bones right there to be that inline guy right next to Jack Indries in 12 personnel. So I do think that the ceiling is very high. What could a Spencer Shannon provide? Does a Nick Townsend expedite his learning curve and get on the field early? Because we know that this is a guy with 5-star tools coming out of Duquesne. He's got that physical prowess to him as well, right? We've talked about the ability for him to play defensive end in college as well, which we don't expect to happen anymore. But look, the point being, you got a lot of options here. Now, how do you utilize them the most? How do you maximize these guys? That's going to be key. But 12 personnel, Jeff, to your point, not going away. Texas right now, I feel like you have a good inline blocker. You have a guy with receiving skills in Jordan Washington. And then Jack Indries is more of your out vertical guy, out in the routes, maybe not going to be your plus blocker, but can certainly help if needed to on chips and little shoulders here and there on the offensive line. So we'll see, but I love the tools that this group is possessing at the moment.
I know Neil Brown came to Texas to help Sark in that special assistant role. I think red zone / quarterback run game is going to be primarily where Neil Brown's focus is. But we know he's been a guy that I think is really good for Arch Manning in terms of when they talk, and Arch has said this, they don't talk X's and O's. It's about leadership and things that have very little to do with what happens between the chalk line in terms of what he's already doing on the whiteboard with Sark and A.J. Milwee. So I like the fact that Neil Brown's there for that. But I also think when you look, CJ, Neil Brown's track record, you go back to his time at Troy, look at what he did at West Virginia, whether it's having that extra back, using multiple tight ends, having the guy in that sniffer role that can move around. I think Neil Brown, plus Jason McIndoe coming from Oklahoma State, we've already heard from some guys internally how important he's been in terms of how Sark is going to manage the tight end position and maybe some new things that he could do with that. Now that you've got some really versatile body types, he kind of invented that cowboy back position, definitely molded it in Mike Gundy's offense at Oklahoma State. So I think you've got two coaches right now, CJ. I think that's where the intrigue is for me. Not only do you have this unique group of personnel, but you got two coaches that can really help you set a foundation for – you're going to have Nick Townsend and Winston and Jordan Washington. You're going to have these guys for the next 2-3 years. They can really help you set a good foundation to build on for where this group can go.
You look at what McIndoe was able to do at Oklahoma State, and a lot of his tight ends that he produced, it was built off of physicality, right? Blake Jarwin comes to mind. He was a guy that the Cowboys ended up drafting, bringing him on for a few years. He wasn't a guy lighting it up in the stat sheet or the box score with his receptions. He was a guy that they were putting in kind of in that sniffer role, as you mentioned, going in almost as a fullback just to lead ways. And that's McIndoe's entire philosophy is, hey, you're a tight end. Yeah, you're going to get catches. You're going to make plays in the passing game. But until that you buy in as a guy that can go up there and physically dominate people, you're going to have to tap the brakes on what you believe your ceiling ultimately is. So that's one of the things that we've heard behind the scenes is that he's bringing out that physicality, that mentality there in the trenches. That tight ends, look, it's tough to kind of adopt that. Look at Jatavian Sanders specifically. So I'm encouraged to see where this room goes because we know that in short yardages, Texas needs all the help that they can get when it comes to moving bodies in that goal line or short down and distances to go situations.
And the kind of the quote, you can get it put on a throw pillow, put it up on crocheted on the wall, whatever you want. The money quote from Sark with his offense: the more things we can do well, the tougher we are to defend. If Texas can become a really good 12 personnel offense with a group that's got room to go, things we talked about that didn't quite let the football program get over the hump last year into the national championship game, that could be a really big part of it. I know, well, is tight end going to make the difference? Not wholly, but I think everybody gets what I'm saying. It's just one more piece that's going to help you get there that you didn't have last year. CJ, let's talk about the recruiting weekend. Everybody's decompressing from a massive visit weekend over the weekend, but this coming weekend, you've got another one. Quite a few verbal commitments going to be on campus. We're several days out from recruits getting to campus for another visit weekend. CJ, what's top of mind for you right now as you look at this June 20th weekend in terms of what Sark and company want to get accomplished?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because June 13th was, for the entire month leading up to now, was expected to be that big weekend, right? It was supposed to have the most visitors, and that's kind of flipped as new faces have popped up. Trenton Henderson, Grayson McKeo out of, the Pennsylvania. Now it's this weekend, and what's helpful is you have a slew of guys already committed. You got 5 commits coming in for their official visits. The big key that I heard, or one of the big takeaways I heard from this past weekend, is the number of guys from this most recent recruiting class on campus helping out hosting, right? It was Bo Barnes, Ellis Hicks, Justice Terry, Lance Jackson, Amari Winston, Nick Brooks. Obviously, they had a lot of Georgia guys in there. But when you have all these big names from a previous cycle on campus set to host, you add KJ Lacey to that group as well. That's going to be really important. Now, Dia Bell coming in, one of the faces of this class with a number of commits as well. So it's going to be important to see how this group comes together, of course. But just having all hands on deck for these official visits, I think goes a long way. And talking to a number of these official visitors as they were departing out of Burge from yesterday, look, they said, my visit probably wouldn't have been the same if it weren't for Bo Barnes sitting me down saying, hey, this is what the coaches pitched to me in my recruitment, and this is how it played out over my first 7 months on campus. Right now, it's been pretty successful. So just hearing from these guys, allowing them to build their trust with not just the staff, but the players on campus to know that they're not being misled. That's something that was a big takeaway this weekend. And with more guys committed next weekend coming in for the official visits, it's going to help those uncommitted guys help make their decisions a little bit easier.
We've got guys getting ready to make decisions. Get over on Texas Football. That's where we've got it. Updates here on the channel. Plenty of updates over at ontexasfootball.com. Jerry Hamilton's reporting there's some guys that probably gave some silent commitments to the staff over the weekend. Got some decisions coming up. So just because the recruits are gone doesn't mean that the intel stops. So we've got you covered here on the channel and over at ontexasfootball.com. CJ, before we go, just some quick portal talk for baseball and softball. Baseball added a couple of pretty significant verbal commitments over the weekend, or actually one late in the week, and then one over the weekend. Caleb Edwards, Georgia State, is the big one that happened over the weekend. And then Jack Maroknik, the Butler outfielder, was an all Big East guy. Both those guys, proven commodities, did it for multiple years, even though it wasn't at the power conference level. The kind of guys Texas was looking for, kind of corner infield, corner outfield guys, big bats. You figure they could come in and produce. A little bit different than Easton Winfield last year. Even though Winfield put up great numbers in 2024 at Louisiana Monroe, only did it for 1 year. These guys have done it for multiple years now. And then in softball, CJ, all I can think of, and look, I'm not hating on Texas Tech because, hey, these are the rules. You can do it. Really reminds me of the Simpsons episode, Homer at the Bat, where Mr. Burns tried to stack the company baseball team with ringers. Tech is doing that. Mr. Burns is trying to buy him a softball championship in Lubbock. CJ, interesting times we're living in, but Schlosson coming and getting it done in the portal. And for Mike White, it's really about, hey, really just hold on to what you got and then work the new recruiting class that he's really excited about. He's told us that multiple times here on the channel. They're really excited about the 2025 recruiting class. Work those recruits in to a roster that's going to return pretty much intact, save for a few spots.
Yeah, I'll start on baseball because I really like what they've been able to do with their 3 position commitments out of the portal so far. Maroknik, of course, a 1.145 OPS. You look at Freeman, a 1.27 OPS. And you look at Livingston, the first commit, a 958 OPS. That's pretty darn good. Those 3 would have been in the top 6 of OPSs for the Longhorns this past year. So, of course, they now have to come do that against SEC competition, SEC pitching, SEC venues. But the point being, you got a lot of guys with a lot of power who get on base. Maroknik, again, a 512 on-base percentage last year. Sign me up for that, Jeff. Mm-hmm. I'm all for it. And then softball, look, if you have the means, who am I to say you can't go do something? I'm a fan of it, to be honest. I think every sport needs a heel. Texas Tech has obviously said, we don't care if folks like us or not. And my kind of mantra with all of this is the teams that complain about not being able to build a portal team the way that Texas Tech has been able to, or an Ole Miss in football, or the way that even Texas has benefited out of the portal in baseball, in football, in basketball. That's a fan of a team that needs to get their money up. I've said that all along. So, look, if Texas Tech wants to put all their funding towards softball, who am I to stop them? But it is pretty interesting. They're collecting the Thanos Infinity Stones when it comes to All-Americans in the portal. But credit to Mike White, because, look, there have been some players on the Longhorn roster who have been approached to go out and potentially play, not just at Texas Tech, but other places in the portal. And they've said, no, I like where I'm at. We just won a national championship. I want to do it again. So credit to Mike White, credit to his roster, and our softball season should be pretty fun, Jeff.
No doubt. Caden Henry, Reese Atwood, Tegan Cavan, all coming back. Plus, again, it's worth repeating, CJ. Every time we've talked to Mike White about what's next, he's quick to remind us they love the 2025 recruiting class and think they've got a couple young ladies in there that can come in and help them right away. If you can come in and immediately help a national championship winning team that's expected to compete in the SEC, I think it's clear you've got some ballers in that class. All right. CJ, thank you so much for the knowledge and expertise. As always, thank you to Matthew behind the scenes. Thank you to the entire On Texas football staff and to Chad Markham and Allegiant Digital Marketing for sponsoring this edition of Longhorn Weekly. Don't forget, if you're not subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel, make sure you do that. Make sure you like this video and get over to ontexasfootball.com, where right now you can sign up for 1 year of access using the promo code OTFOG. That'll get you 1 year of access for $39.95. Again, the promo code OTFOG. 1 year of access at ontexasfootball.com for $39.95. You don't want to miss out. For Matthew, for the On Texas football staff, for CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And until next time, welcome.